this land of ours.
Hello, Canada hockey fans in the United States.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Hockey Time Machine. I'm Mike Wilson, the Ultimate Leafs fan. I'll be your host this evening, featuring, well, I got a little technical problem right now, but we've got Squid and the Hounds is tonight's episode. So let's go right to it and meet our guests. Now, we do have a little bit of an issue with the first guy because he's being technically challenged. But let's introduce him anyway. He was a baby bull taken 5th overall in the 1979 draft by the Vancouver Canucks. Was abruptly traded halfway through his first season to the Maple Leafs, where he became the first Leaf to score not only 50 goals in a season, but do it 3 times in a row. Was named captain in 1982. He was my co-host on the very popular podcast, Squid and the Ultimate Leaf Fan. Well, it is with our wives and kids anyway. Please welcome Ricky Squid Vaive. And unfortunately, he can't answer you right now because his sound isn't working, or is it? Nope. Squid is very definitely technically challenged. You can see his pretty face on the screen, but we can't hear him. So let's go to the second guest. Our next is the first member of the Hound, was taken 24th overall by the Leafs in the 82 draft, played close to 10 years in Toronto, scored 50 goals in the season, was part of one of the biggest trades in Maple Leaf history and won a Cup of Montreal. Welcome, Gary Lehman. Gary, how are we keeping? Do you feel like a prisoner locked down these days?
Absolutely. It's great not being around people.
Yeah, well, you don't get to talk to one of your wingers here, Mr. Vaive, but we'll try and get him on as the series goes on here.
It's great that you muted him. Good job.
The second member of the Hound Line was taken 7th overall by the Leafs in 1983, played 16 years in NHL, including almost 6 in Toronto, and he too would be part of one of the more controversial trades in Leaf history. Welcome, Russ Courtnall. Rusty, how's life in sunny California? Or is it sunny?
Going great. Thank you for having me.
Good to have you.
Good to see everybody and not hear Rick.
And finally, the third member of the Hound Line was taken 1st overall by the Leafs in 1985. Played close to 13 years in the blue and white. Was made captain in 91. His style of play resonated with fans, immediately becoming one of the all-time favorites. Of course, referring to Wendel Clark. Wendell, how are things today? Did you get all your chores done?
All good today. Drove in out of the city, back up here, safe and sound up north with Gary. I'm good.
Fantastic. Well, I was gonna start this off with Squid, but I guess I can't right now. So we'll go from oldest to youngest as we go along. Gary, you're a Toronto kid, joined a very successful minor hockey league career to start off with, upbringing with the Wexford Hockey Association. One day you get a call from a guy from school out west. Take us through all that and what happened there and where you ended up.
Well, actually, my dad got the call. I was in Cincinnati at the time at a soccer tournament, and it just so happened that my dad and I had the same name, and my name was in the paper. Probably about a month before we got the call, and it was Martin Kenny, the president of Notre Dame, wanting to know if I wanted to come out to Saskatchewan and play hockey. And I was thinking to myself, why would I want to go to Saskatchewan when I'm in Toronto? But anyhow, long story short, it was a great decision to go, and got a chance to play 2 years at Notre Dame and get 2 hours ice time a day and have great coaching. So it was a move that I'm glad I made.
Russ, you grew up playing on the West Coast, having early success, but your dad wanted you to get a little different experience with more of a Canadian feel to it when you were about 14. Take us through that and how you ended up where you did.
Yeah, a couple kids from Victoria went to Notre Dame, and my dad was so impressed with the hockey and the schooling, and Notre Dame used to come out on the West Coast and play exhibition games. So we went and watched when I was, I don't know, 11 or 12 years old. And he kept talking to me about it and saying, I really want you to go there. And unfortunately, my dad passed away when I was 13. And out of the blue, a year later, we got a call from Martin Kenny, same as Gary. And he was asking my mom if she would allow me to go. And she said no. And Martin was smart enough to know that my mom had gone back to work after my dad had passed away. So he called at lunch hour. I quickly said yes, phoned my mom at work and told her I was going to Notre Dame. And I ended up playing bantam there when I was 14. I skipped a year when I was 15, unfortunately, and that's when I would have played with Gary. And then I went back at 16, and that's where I played with Wendel. Wendel and I played on the same team that year in Notre Dame for Barry McKenzie, who was a great coach, coached all three of us, probably one of the best coaches I've ever had. And anyways, it was a great experience. I wish I had gone there all 3 years instead of just the 2, but learned a lot. Just an incredible place, great experience for me, and a lot of life lessons there learned.
Well, I'm sure there was. We'll try and get into that eventually. Wendell, you were from Saskatchewan to begin with, so you're a little more familiar with Notre Dame than most. Tell us how you made this decision to end up there. Was just a case of your parents tiring and driving you everywhere and maybe one-stop shopping?
Pretty much they were sick of driving me. I played in Yorkton, just ahead of that, 100 miles from home. So 5 days a week going 100 miles. I think they got tired of driving. But my older brother went there just ahead of Gary, played with some of Gary's teammates in Notre Dame. So he went and played on Notre Dame just ahead of Gary. And then when it was my turn to go, I went and I was a year behind in school. So I was actually grade 9. I think before the tryout started, I think everybody thought I was trying out for the Bantam team. But then I heard the story later. Had my dad heard that the president of the college back then was the president of the junior hockey league when my dad was playing, and he suspended my dad from junior hockey for life. So he wouldn't have probably sent his sons there had he known that he was the priest had suspended him for life from junior hockey.
So guys, maybe talk about, you did touch on the coaching and how good it was, but just maybe give the listeners an idea of how strong the competition actually was and some of the guys you actually played with. Gary, I know you had some real success there also, but just talk about some of the players.
Oh, wow. My first year there, was lucky enough to play on a team. We lost one game that year, tied another game. Barry McKenzie was the coach. On defense, as partners were Gordy Kluzak, who went number 1 my draft year, and James Patrick, who went number 3 overall the year before. They were defense partners. I don't think they got scored on all year. Brian Kern, he also played defense. So just, as midgets, they were the size they were as pros, playing defense as midgets. So you get a pretty good idea of, what it was like for midgets to play against these guys. We had 3 other defensemen that were excellent defensemen. And up front, we had, maybe our 2 best players were our 2 centermen. Gordy Flegel was our captain. He was not a very big guy. And the guy that I played with on the same line as Lyndon Byers was Dale Durkach. He was 5'6", 135 pounds, he was 5'5", 135 pounds, and he actually ended up getting drafted by the Edmonton Oilers as a centerman in the 80s, which was a little bit impossible for him to break into that lineup. They had a guy wore 99 and another guy that wore 11, and another guy that Kent Nielsen was the other centerman at the time. So, he quickly realized that if he wanted to continue hockey, he went over to Europe. But we had Gordy Sturman, Todd Struby, our 2 goaltenders, Todd Lombard and Mike Appleby. We had, I think, 13 or 14 guys drafted professionally off that team. So it was
Barry
quite
Trotz on that team, Gary?
Trotsy was at the school. He was
Okay.
yeah, he was actually playing
Yeah, no, I just wanted to do it over the phone. Leave your phone.
Here's Squid.
Squid's always interrupting the meetings, eh?
Very uncoachable.
Okay, can we hear? You want to talk for a second, or can you, Squid?
Squid, can you hear everybody?
There he is. Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Oh!
There he is.
Good, new technology. By the way, folks, he is on a podcast. He's done 43 episodes, and he's done, I don't know, what, 50 interviews, and he's just like this. He's a quick study, as you can see.
Just
Yeah,
My partner.
really quick.
a little late, just like in Minnesota.
That was right.
Hey, let's not get into that now. Come on.
We're saving that one for the end. Okay, well, so boys, okay, now Squid, we'll get to you in a minute. Just you'll have to wait a second here while we get through the rest of these guys. We were talking about some of the players. Wes, can you add to what Gary was talking about and some of the guys you played with?
Well,
I didn't hear what he said.
Well, you don't have to.
I obviously Wendel, best player on the team too. But go back to Gary's team when I was in Bantam watching his team play, it was unbelievable. That team was probably the best amateur team I've ever watched play. It was so much fun. Learned a lot watching the great players on that team. And we had a good team. We were we had a few issues. We had some interesting players. We had a great player in Dwayne Hutton, who is a real character. Somebody should make a movie about this kid. Super talented and did some of the craziest things you've ever heard of, or maybe will ever hear of, that a hockey player's ever done playing. Some of the things he said were legendary. But another guy, Mitch Messier, he was drafted, I think, to Minnesota. Wendel,
Terry Perkins went to Quebec.
Grant
Jennings.
Yeah, to Hartford.
Pittsburgh.
Paul Moore get drafted?
Paul Moore. I don't know if Paul was drafted or not. Yeah. Paul Gerard played the minors, or he was he was on the AA team, not the AAA team. Paul Gerard, remember Paul?
But we had a good team. We were underachievers, as Barry McKenzie told us when we lost to Nova Scotia in the Air Canada Cup. I think it was Nova Scotia or New Brunswick, or anyway. But
probably PEI.
But we had a really good hockey team. We didn't win the two tournaments we should have won, but we had a good.
Well, let's get Squid a chance to get back into this. I want to go into you guys, your draft year coming up. We're moving up from Notre Dame and where you went to junior. And Squid, you were playing in Sherbrooke. You gave up your last year to play in the WHA. Maybe take us through that. But the other part of that, sacrificing that and why you did that, was the first year of the World Juniors was in '78, and you played in that team, Canada's first real all-star team, to play against the best in the world. Did that also influence you or give you some sort of incentive to see how you could measure up, and then that made the decision to go to the WHA?
Yeah, I think it did a little bit. I think mainly my last season in Sherbrooke, though, was the one that, made me realize that I could play at that level. And, it was go back to junior and play against guys my own age, or play against men and maybe improve. And I just figured that the best way to get better was to play against guys that were older, bigger, stronger, and had already played pro. And, sure enough, that really helped me, I think, going forward.
Gary, your draft year, you were playing forward but moved to defense, and this is the second time this happened to you. This happened at the Notre Dame year over year. You switched from forward to defense. You're playing forward. They tried to reunite your Notre Dame line with Regina, and you were playing there, and you were doing well. Out of necessity, you moved to defenseman. Take us through that, and also some of the charity you made. I heard about getting drafted. And I think, didn't you go a game one night and tell your dad why you were going to play in the National Hockey League?
Yeah, poor Mike. Yeah, I was asked to play defense one night. right around Christmas time when Garth Butcher, our best defenseman, got called up to play with the Canadian national or junior national team. So we're on our way to Brandon, and my coach Bill LaForge called me up to the front of the bus, and he said, "Sit down." And so I sat there. He goes, "Didn't you play defense last year as a midget?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "Well, can you play tonight? Can you fill in for Butch?" And I said, "Sure." And so I played that night, and I ended up getting 5 points. I think I had 2 goals, 3 assists, or 3 goals, 2 assists. And after the game, he said, he goes, "You're a fucking defenseman." so he left me there. When Butch come back, we partnered up and finished the year together, and ended up getting drafted by the Leafs as a defenseman. And then, the next few years, I think because of that, I spent time playing both positions. And finally, when John Brophy came, he and Wendel and Russ had already come to the Leafs. He said, "Listen, at training camp," he said, "if I make you a forward, can you score me 20 goals?" And I said, "Sure, if you play me." So he played me with these guys, and that's what happened.
Now, what about the story with your dad going to a game one night? You were a young kid, and everybody wanted to play in the NHL.
Yeah, so I had come home from Notre Dame for Christmas. There's always a 2-week break at Christmas, and my Christmas present was always to go to a Leaf game. So my dad had a friend. We had a friend that had 2 front row gray tickets, and he had planned that again for this year. And I was gaining a lot of confidence that year. I was getting all that ice time at Notre Dame, 2 hours a day, and great coaching, and of course surrounded by great players. And I'm watching the Leafs, and I turned to my dad and I said, I'm going to play in the NHL. And he looks at me and he goes, "Why do you say that?" And I said, "Because if that guy can play, I can play." And I pointed to Mike Pellick. Poor Mike. I see him every time I see him, I tell him that story, and I thank him. I thank him for the inspiration.
Now, Rusty, you weren't even thinking of getting drafted until reading the newspaper one day on a bus ride, and then all of a sudden that changed everything for you.
Well, I like Wendell was gaining a lot of, like Gary was gaining a lot of confidence at Notre Dame, and I wanted to play in the NHL like probably every kid in Canada, in the United States, or anywhere in the world where you lace up skates. But I just didn't think Russ Courtnall. It didn't sound like, you'd hear that name on Hockey Night in Canada. Anyways, I make Victoria Cougars as a 17-year-old. I'm playing with my brother and Stu Kulak, and we're playing really well. The team's doing well. And I opened the Hockey News on the bus on our way to Seattle one road trip, and it had the ratings for the first round for the draft that year, and I was rated 18. There's only 21 teams then, so I was rated like 18th or 19th. And I closed the newspaper and I went, "Holy shit! I'm going to do this." And then the next month it came out, I was rated 15th or 14th, and then it came out again. I think the highest I got rated was around 11, and then I got drafted 7th. But that moment on that bus, reading the Hockey News, I figured, okay, now it's my time. I'm gonna play.
Wendell, you went through the same thing, Ona. You were highly touted most of the year, but the Team Canada World Juniors had to play in your future position, maybe shifting. Explain how that all came about.
No, in order to make the World Junior team, I got called in. I thought I was getting cut at 7 a.m. You get the phone call. Back then it was TSN. You'd get cut on TV. Imagine that. All the kids, first time they've ever been cut on national TV. But I got that 7 a.m. phone call and thinking I was going in to get cut. And Terry Simpson and Sherry Basson were there, and they asked if I would play some forward if I was asked. And that year myself and John Miner from the Regina Pats were asked to make the team and play defense and forward because they wanted to take 8 defensemen to the World Juniors in Finland. And so him and I switched off playing defense and forward on and off. And I played. So it shows you the Leafs, they scouted 3 games in Finland to draft me.
Well, and I think he took the spot of a future buddy of yours, didn't you, and Gary Roberts?
Well, you don't know at the time. Back then, like Gary, like Russ was mentioning the hockey news, which is always 2-3 weeks late. You don't know who's trying out, and so I didn't realize till later when Gary and I were co-captains, kind of thing, of representing when it was World Juniors in Canada. But my year, Todd Gill got cut, Joe Newendike got cut, Gary Roberts got cut, and Patrick Waugh got cut from the World Junior team. Craig Billington, the career backup, beat out Patrick Waugh that year.
So that gives us show you.
Yeah, that's when Gary Roberts said, so I got beat out by a defenseman, is what he said. And the next year, Gary, I think, was the best. Him and Shane, Gary and Sandlak the next year, probably the best 2 players in '86 on the World Junior team.
I get the credit for converting those 2 to 4 defensemen.
Well,
So shitty in my own end, he had to put 4.
Now, Squid, you were playing pro, but you must have heard some inklings along the way who may take you or where you may go, especially with your agent probably right in the thick of it all.
yeah, actually the only team that I thought our draft was a little weird because it was the merger of the WHA with the NHL, and it happened. The draft happened in August, and it was just a phone draft, so you just sat at home waiting for the phone call. And the only team I had talked to was Washington, and they drafted 4th. And I thought perhaps they were going to take me because they were the only team that I actually interviewed with. But they ended up taking Mike Gardner instead of me, and I went next, 5th overall to Vancouver. So they didn't make a bad choice either. The guy scored like 700 goals or something, but it was disappointing because I thought I was going to Washington for sure. But hey, you get drafted in the top 10 in the National Hockey League, you're not going to be too upset about it.
Now, you after playing with the pros for a year, let's just stay with you for a minute here. Maybe your approach to first camp was a little more relaxed than maybe it should have been because, after all, you're playing with the pros as an 18-year-old. You led the Bulls in scoring. You had 248 minutes in penalties. So maybe thinking as an 18-year-old this was going to be just a seamless transition?
I think I probably took it a little bit too lightly. I think realizing that, because I thought, well, this isn't going to be that hard. I mean, I had a good year last year playing in the pros, and it's not going to be that difficult. And I think I took it a little bit too lightly. But Harry Neal wouldn't have you hear that. He would say that I was out of shape, and he beat me in the 5-kilometer run and everything else. I don't think Harry could walk 5 miles, let alone run. And so anyway, he put it all up to the fact that I was out of shape and that sort of thing. And whatever. I took it in stride and did whatever I could, and then eventually ended up in the press box and then off to Toronto.
Russ, you had a little bit of a different view for your first camp because you were already told, I believe, you were going back to juniors. So, but still, regardless, you're coming from out west. You're a fan of the Maple Leafs. Your first camp coming into that, your head must have been in a bit of a swivel and just sort of adjusting everything going on around you.
Yeah, it was a big deal, but it was. I was relaxed going into camp as far as knowing I wasn't going to make the team. But I went there, obviously tried to do my best and impress them and play as well as I could. It was back when we have the 2-a-days and new for me. And the second round of hockey, your gear soaking wet, your skates weigh a ton. And that was a big adjustment. And then the next year I was ready for it. So probably like Squid saying, he wasn't maybe prepared for what was going to happen to us when we first got there. But for me, it was the 2-a-days was a big shocker for a skinny kid back then.
Gary,
I thought that was a lot of fun, the 2-a-days.
Oh, yeah.
Well, no, not really.
Now, Gary, your circumstance was a little different than Russ's because you were out to make the team, and they gave you a great shot, but it sort of didn't end the way it was kind of going along in camp.
Yeah, you mean my first year?
Yeah, your first year.
Yeah, it was great. I couldn't ask for a better situation. I was partnered with Boreas Salming, and we were roommates. And I'm thinking, wow, this is pretty special. You know, and I was ready. I mean, I was one of probably a handful of guys that showed up, you know, in those days, in shape. And actually, I think guys like Squid were kind of mad at me for coming in shape, if I recall. And,
Your recollection is wrong, Gary.
it was a little different back then. It was different where the guys were. This was right at the end of old school hockey, and you know, I showed up in shape. I had a great camp, I think, because of that, and then got called in at the end of camp. Jerry McNamara, our GM, he pulled me in and he said, I just want you to know that you were one of the best, if not the best player at camp. And I thought, holy shit, I just made the Toronto Maple Leafs. And he goes, well, we're going to send you back to junior. And like, I couldn't understand it. I was like, I was so green, I guess. I didn't understand the whole idea. It took me a little bit, and I was, you know, it was a great thing, obviously, to go back and play a full year on defense, and you know, and kind of be a, you know, the quarterback in the power play, and just learn the position at a, you know, at a level that was going to help me, you know, down the road, which I thought. But ended up being,
sorry, Gary. Wendel, you were taken first overall, so you're expected to play. Did you feel a little anxious attending your first camp, knowing as the first pick, and especially in a city like Toronto, a lot would be expected of you?
We didn't know anything about expectations. Like Russ mentioned about the hockey news, that's the only news we kind of knew. You know, you knew Toronto. You watched a lot with Montreal being and Vancouver being the teams. Then Edmonton and Calgary came in, but the NHL seemed so far away. You didn't expect it, especially when you're, you know, where Squid's from out east, or Russ and I out west. The NHL seems so far away. You don't get to see it. Like if you grew up like Gary in Toronto, you've seen it Wednesday and Saturday. You have a pretty good idea what the NHL is about. But if you didn't grow up near it, it seems so far away, and you didn't know. So you didn't know you were going to make it until you actually did.
So you three were all drafted into Toronto. The fourth, the elder statesman, was traded. So let's talk about that. The day of the trade, Squid, you kept hearing Neil waiting in the lobby for some reason, and I think the reason why is probably a bit of an explanation of why he was down there to see you in the first place. So did that catch you a little bit off guard with the news he had for you? And if not for the luck of a federal election, you and Billy D on the way to Toronto may have had a little different reception than what you originally got. Maybe tell us all that story.
Well, it was like 6:30 in the morning, I think, and I had just moved into my apartment. There was no apartments available in Vancouver anywhere when I got there. So I lived with Glenn Hanlon in Burnaby, and I had an apartment all in the building that was next to Harry Neal's. And gosh, I can't even remember the kid's name that I got the apartment with. But anyway, we had a little apartment warming party, I guess you could say, the night before, because we were on a 14-day road trip. We came home, moved into the apartment, had a little bit of fun. And then the next morning, we're sleeping and the phone rings in my bedroom, and I thought, what the hell's going on? The phone isn't even hooked up and yet, but it was to open the door. So anyway, I picked it up, and someone said, hello, it's Harry, let me in. And I thought it was the guy screwing around. So I just hung up. Phone rang again. I pressed the button I was supposed to, and then it rang a third time, and Harry said, just come down to the door. And so anyway, I go down to the door. He tells me I'm traded to Toronto, and I got a 1 o'clock flight or whatever. So I go to the rink, get my stuff. Billy's wife picked us up, took us to the airport. We get on the plane. Billy said, why don't we have a couple of beer and relax? And well, it was election day, so they weren't serving any alcohol on the flight because of the election. So it bummed Billy out a hell of a lot more than it did me. Anyway, I didn't give a damn one way or the other whether or not I had a beer or not, but Billy was content on having one, so I think he was a little bit more pissed off than I was.
Now, what about landing in Toronto?
Well, so, and we get into Toronto, so it's a good thing that it was election day because we didn't expect it. We came out off the plane, came out the door, and back then there wasn't as much as there is now, but there was probably 15 reporters there, different television stations and newspapers and radio and so on. So I looked at Billy and I said, thank God it was election day and we didn't have, because I know in my case, if I had 2 or 3, I probably would have had 10, and that wouldn't have been a good scene when we landed.
No, it wouldn't have been. The biggest adjustment that you guys cannot, what was the biggest adjustment from junior to the NHL? Let's go with you, Russ, to see what you thought of right off the bat.
Playing against men, just the size and strength of everybody. And it took me a few years to get, a lot stronger. And I think my first year I was 175 pounds. I finished at about playing at 190, 188, 190 in my later years, my prime. But you can imagine being 175 pounds and lighter, getting pushed, manhandled by people with man strength that I just didn't have. So that was probably the biggest adjustment for me. I was a quick skater, so the speed wasn't an issue for me. It was just the strength of the players I was playing against and how to try to avoid that.
Gary?
Yeah, I think what Russ just said, I couldn't say it any better. Strength at that time, that's, you go from playing with boys to men, and I was probably at my strongest, in my mid-20s, so it was a few years of having to adjust to that and get stronger. And the other thing I think is probably the time with the puck. You have a little bit more time in junior. You have to make quicker decisions in the NHL, and because the players you're playing against are, they're better taught, and they're taught to close the gap and to finish their checks and all that stuff. So those are the two biggest things that I think that we probably all dealt with.
Wendel?
Yeah, no, the biggest adjustment to pro hockey is strength, and most players. Most players don't make the NHL to you're 23. You try to tell parents that all the time. Don't compare yourself to the Austin Matthews or Mitch Marners. You're going to finish junior, play all your college, then play 2 years in the minors, and then you might be good enough and strong enough. So I got lucky in a way. I broke my foot, I think, about 14 games in. I don't think I was trying to block the shot. I was probably doing a flamingo when I broke my foot. And I was out till just about Christmas. And the strength, because then they had weight rooms in the NHL, and just the strength training you did for 2 months and stuff, I got to grow in size and get stronger. And then when I come back from Christmas on, it was a difference for the NHL for me. Like that Gary and Russ said, when you start as an 18-year-old, in junior you get to play one line you play against is pretty good, and the other 3 lines are 16 years old. And you can pretty much do what you want. Where you get the NHL, the 4th line might not be that good, but they're all men, they're all big and strong. So it's a different level at the NHL. Every night, every player can play.
Squid, it's been a couple of years for the rebuild for the Leafs and drafting all these young guys and trying to bring guys along. Now all of a sudden, all these young guys are throwing their lineup, starting in goal, defense, the Besters and Reggetts and Benning, Freddie McGill, these 3. What were the vets sort of discussing through this whole period? Were you guys a little frustrated at the approach by management, or did you just want to see if this would all play out?
Well, obviously there was frustration because we weren't winning, and that I think more than anything was the thing that bothered everybody. Yeah, it was. I thought they made mistakes, and then there's times too where I sit and I wonder sometimes what would have happened if they had left Gary and Wendel on defense, and then they maybe wouldn't have drafted all those young defensemen and put them in too early, because I think Gary and Wendel at the time were ready. They could have played defense in the National League as well as they played forward. So. I wonder that sometimes, but in our case, it was more that we just weren't winning, and I thought mistakes were made. I thought guys like Benning, Boimstruck, even Gary Nyland, who physically probably was ready, but mentally he wasn't. And I think they were brought in too early, and they struggled, and none of them had lengthy careers. Probably a lot of it had to do with the fact that they came in way too early.
Well, the division you guys played in was certainly not one for the weak of heart, the Norris Division. So let's get into that. It was a pure battlers division. Gary, you had a taste of it a little bit before your two line mates. How was it? How was that division now that you look back on it when you guys were playing at that time?
Well, they named it the Chuck Norris Division for a reason. It was pretty physical. But if I could, I'd just like to back up because
yeah, absolutely.
Obviously, this podcast is for Leaf fans, and one thing to understand about that time in the organization, just like any good company or business or whatever, it all starts at the top. And one thing to understand at that time was our owner was doing the hiring. He hired both the GM and the coach, and both didn't have the same ideas. So what I noticed was there was confrontation, and our GM, the guy who drafted Russ, Wendel, and myself, he wanted us to play. He wanted us to develop because he knew we weren't ready to win yet. And guys like Squid and Billy D and John Anderson and Boria and these guys that have been playing for a few years, they were more supported by the coach because the coach has the pressure to win today. And that's what I think happened during our time. And a lot of mistakes were made because of the struggle between those two positions in management. So anyhow.
No, and about the division.
Yeah, the division was it was tough. It seemed like we felt like we could win. You looked around and you went, we have talent here, and then you thought, well, there's not a whole lot of direction. I'm not really learning much right now. And for me, I mean, I kind of sat in the press box for most of my time for 3 years. So I'm wondering, am I going to stick with the team? If I do, what position am I going to play? There was just a whole lot of uncertainty at the time, and there was really no direction. But when we played, when we just happened to get things going, we had the ability to really surprise teams. And again, like I alluded to at the beginning, it was a physical game at the time, and the division was very tough. So I enjoyed playing in places like Chicago. I had most of my road success there. Minnesota was a little bit boring. Detroit was always, it was a rivalry. So, we were always up for those games and stuff. But it was, it was a tough division back then. And, we could only do what we could do.
Well, Russ,
was that a chicken wing I seen up there?
Definitely.
Russ, you inadvertently in Chicago one night in a hockey player reaction to hitting a guy to defend yourself. Bit off maybe a little more than you could chew, leading to one of the more memorable fights in Garden's history. Maybe walk us through that whole story.
Well, I think I was in my third or fourth game. I'm 18 years old. It's after the Olympics. I get called up in '84. and I'm playing with Rick and Jim cracked corn. And after the whistle, we're in Chicago, Ben Wilson cross-checked me. And I turned around. I don't know why. Maybe I thought I was still in the Western Hockey League, and I wasn't a fighter. And I punched Ben Wilson right in the face with my glove on. He went freaking crazy, and Jim Corn shit his pants. Because he had to take care of him. And we got back to the bench. They didn't fight, but there was a lot of FUs, and I'm going to kill you. I'm going to knock your teeth out. I'm going to carve your eyes out. And Jim Corn is yelling at me all the way to the bench and then scolded me on the bench till we went out the next shift. And every shift I played against Ben Wilson after that, he abused me for that punch. And then Wendel Clark came along. Thank freaking God.
A little joust, and now Wendel Clark, 2 left hands on Wilson. Back to their feet, and Clark, 3 right hands on Ben Wilson. Now Ben tries to get a right hand or 2 in. And they're hammering away at one another. Wendel Clark, a hard-nosed rookie, and now he's got the right hand free. Wilson got in a big right there. Wilson's jersey has been pulled right over his head. As
Can you hear me?
Wilson and Wendel Clark are standing.
I can hear you, Russ.
Yeah, keep going.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, Wendel had it. So when I started playing with Wendel, like when we played midget hockey together, I don't think I ever saw Wendel fight. You get kicked out of the game if you fought, I think. And he was a defenseman, first year player, midget hockey. So I never saw him fight. And I was in the pros when he was playing junior. So we're playing together, and it was unfreaking believable when he fought. It was unbelievable, and I had the best seat in the house, which was usually right beside him. But Clarky used to say to me, he said, look, after the whistle, if shit hits the fan, count to 3. And if you're in trouble, just count to 3. And if I'm not there in 3, you're on your own because I'm fighting somebody else. For all the guys to say, don't go near him, I'll kill you. And it just gave me so much room when Wendel and and Gary played together. It was awesome. And a lot of my success was due to, both these guys, Wendel and Gary, but man, what a difference it was when I played with Wendel. And the fear of other players who felt like they might have to fight Wendel that didn't want to fight Wendel, you could see it, you could feel it. And we got to witness some of the best fights in our era for sure. It was great.
And that one, Squid, you saw that fight too, and I think that was the one that opened your eyes that said, "Oh my goodness, this kid really is something." When he fought Ben Wilson that night.
Well, absolutely, because I had fought or played against Ben already for several years, and Russ, when he said, "I'll carve out your eye," he meant it. He wasn't kidding. But that fight, I remember that fight because it was right in front of our bench. And I was amazed. I was like, holy shit. I said, he is one tough son of a bitch because he just took on one of the toughest guys in the league and basically kicked the shit out of him. I said, this is great.
Now, Wendel, what about you going through this? Did you and Ben exchange some words before that battle happened, or did it just all come about?
No, I think Rick was at the game. You hit Ben Wilson or high sticked him in that, and he come back to the bench, and I think he speared you on the bench. Remember, Ben didn't.
Oh yeah, it might have been.
You hit him in the corner or something. He come back. Anyway, we ended up. I don't even know why we fought, but Ben was the type of guy that if you did something to him, and it didn't have to be bad, he would disregard what the game is all about, and he'd be totally on the dog and a bone. He'd be on that guy, or if he wanted something, and that's how Ben played. But that whole division had, whether it be Chicago, Minnesota, so every team had 2, 3, 4 guys that would rather play that way than play the other way. So It was,
except for us.
Yeah, it was an exciting division to be a part of, and I know we all talked about the skill, the skill in that. I tell people, I remember Rick and I, we did a few functions and talked about it. I always say the skill on that team from '86 to '87 was more skill than we had on the team from '92 to '94 when we went to the semifinals. We just didn't have anybody to put it together. Like if we had something like in today's coaching to put it together, they had so much skill that they drafted over time on the Leafs on that roster, and we kind of proved it in the playoffs. Just open and shut the door, and we go 2 rounds to 7 games in both times. And if you could have put and let the guys age, Rick with your line, Tom Ferguson, Squid, you had Walt Podubny there, Peter Inichuk. Like we had 20 more goal scorers on the one team. Now we both our goalies were 20. Reggett, Bester. That if you could just put it together and held it together, that was a pretty good group of guys, and all the players went off in different directions and did very well. So I always tell people that and us young guys, Russ and I and Gary had been there for 2-3 years, and Rick, we just thought he was old. He was already salt and pepper hair already at 25. But we didn't understand. We just went and played. Russ and I and Todd Gill and Jeff Jackson and the guys. We were just happy to be in the NHL. You don't feel pressure. I always tell people that the young players, they have all this pressure, and they really don't. They're so happy to be in the NHL that they don't feel pressure. You don't. You're just out there playing, and so. I just wish that team they could have kept that squad together.
Now, Wendel, your reputation. Let's go while we're on that subject. Let's continue a little bit with as you're getting your reputation throughout the league of being somebody that's not afraid to drop and Miyake can handle yourself. Are you finding more guys are challenging you? And then actually, let's take it one step further. There's a famous fight in training camp where guys started to come after you, and I think one guy did who I think on second thought wished he hadn't done that, and maybe talk to that a little bit about.
Well, that was camp year 2. Was it Kevin McGuire fight you're talking about?
Yeah, Kevin McGuire.
John Brophy wanted Mags to make the team as a tough guy, so he sent him out after myself, and I wasn't trying out for that role. But that's what. But and then there's a fight, and then send him back out again. I think that's when Russ was getting in a stick swinging stage 2 of the training camp. But no, I probably wanted to do it too much. That was part of my problem. But like doing it, it was part of the game, and you always fight more when you're a fighter when you played on teams that weren't winning because you're always trying to change the game or do something different. So, had we been a team that was 60-20 instead of 20-60, probably wouldn't have been as many fights. But that was part of how I played, and was fun. I found it fun, so I did it. And then as you got older, you figured out that it is harder on you, and you can't keep doing it at that level when you're not a big guy. At 5'10" and your guys are big, it's harder to do.
Well, I was going to mention one more thing. Is the Bruce Bell hit is probably one of the most watched hits of all time. Beller actually played on our slow pitch team and he was on our team that summer, and I think he was actually scared around first base. But of course, when he has the old bench yelling that Wendell's playing second, look out, it sort of didn't help him very much. But that has to rank as one of your greatest hits. Any other ones come to mind? And Gary and Rush, you can chip in too if any of you spotted or Squid that you spotted over the years.
No, no, that hit was basically caused by, I can't remember. They'll know it was either Greg Millen or Wamsley in that. I can't remember which was playing that, but they were telling him it was all clear. So he was doing the Paul Coffey or Bobby Orr pick up behind the net, and there was nobody. And I would just come off early in a line change. And when I hit him, he hit me so hard his skate went through my shin pad and cut my leg. But that was he had no idea. But the 2 hardest hits I ever took were in Edmonton. Mark Messier stood me up at center ice with my head down, and Mary Robinson did the same thing in Montreal my first year. And I never fell down, but those hits are even worse. Your whole body is just rattling. You get back to the bench and you don't want to talk. You can't breathe. You can't do anything. And those two guys give me the wake-up call that you can't skate through center ice with your head down.
I just want to chime in on what Wendel said earlier, how he said it was fun fighting. He enjoyed it. And when we played together his rookie year, he broke the rookie goal scoring record for the Maple Leafs. And we get back to the bench. He's getting a standing ovation. And he looks over at me and he says, "I'd rather fight than score any day."
Gary, you got any comments?
As the whole place is giving him a standing ovation for breaking a record.
Gary, how about you? Any memorable ones that you remember?
Oh, well, the Bruce Bell one was, I had just crossed center ice. The puck went in, and I was going off. I was changing because it was time to change. Wendell, you should have known that, but you kept going. You stayed out there. Anyhow, when he smoked Bruce, I was close to the bench, but I was back on our side of center ice, and I heard the air come out of Bruce Bell. I heard the and I felt like that was the most unbelievable hit that I think I've ever seen. And then I think Wendell ended up fighting the
big guy,
Bourgeois,
Charlie Bourgeois.
Charlie Bourgeois.
6'7" white guy do the moonwalk until that.
Yeah, there were so many hits. I mean, that was one of the unfortunate things. Wendell put his body on the line all the time, and unfortunately, he didn't play as much as I hoped that he would. He missed a lot of games in a few year period, and it was just, it was the nature of the beast, I guess, and just the way he wanted to play the game, or was told to play the game. I don't know. I know he came from a tough family. His brothers were tough. His old man was tough, and so apple doesn't fall far. So we ended up not having him in the lineup as much as we needed him back then. But like Russ said, we had a kind of a front row seat to see a lot of these great fights. And one of the things about his fighting, I think Leaf fans probably know, but maybe need to hear it from the guys that were in the front row seats watching it. Wendell was a vicious fighter. The fight was on. Like, if a guy looked at him, it was on, and it was basically halfway done when he started. So that was one of the things that he brought to the team, and of course, going back to the Ben Wilson fight, I personally thought that was his message to the rest of the league that, I might be young, but I'm here. I might not be as tall as some of you guys, but I'm certainly here. And he took on all comers. His battles with Proby, who arguably, obviously one of the toughest, the best fighters, and most willing guys. And there were a lot of guys back then. So having a chance to play with Wendell and Russ was a great thing. And one of the things to really backtrack in the conversation was, I remember when Wendell had an amazing wrist shot, but it wasn't like he got it away like really quick. And I think the fact that he beat the shit out of so many guys, they gave him enough room that he could take his time and absolutely whale it. And I noticed that because I'd always be on the right wing wide open when he should have passed it to me, but he didn't. And he let this shot go that was like, holy shit, like, so anyhow, that's enough of tooting his horn. Here he goes. I missed the net. He missed the net with that shot.
Well, ask Curtis Joseph about his head.
So always sending a message, Wendell? Always sending a message.
We were only
And
up
of course,
6-0.
Russ could rip it too. Russ had a great shot. He had the butter knife, eh? He had a stick with a curve, a lot like mine, which was like you just bend it from the heel, and it was like you measure it with the gauge, and it didn't even register on the gauge. You can see his butter knife right there. He's gonna go high probably. No. Oh, he hit it. He hit it going 5-hole. Anyhow, it was great playing with those guys.
Well, boys, let's talk about the owner, Harold. First off, let's talk. How did everybody get along with him? We'll talk up with you, Squid, to lead it off, and actually how you got made captain by him. Well, actually, you had no choice, actually.
Well, I had a choice, but the choice was he just came up to me one day and he said, "You're our captain," and like it's not like they called me in the office and asked me if I'd like it or whatever. I mean, I was obviously honored that he would think that I was worthy of being the captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs, but at the same time, I didn't think I was ready at 22, and I thought, you know what, but if I say no, he's probably going to trade me, and I didn't want to leave Toronto at that point, so, it was kind of a catch-22 situation, which we all know what that is, obviously, and I thought that, yeah, there we go. And I just thought, you know what, I better take it, and hopefully I grow into the role and things get better.
Can't turn on a goddamn mic, but you can write a book.
But, well, I wasn't the guy that put the stuff on paper, though. It was Scotty. All I had to do was tell him everything, and then he put it on paper.
Yes, we know.
But speaking of hits, I remember that hit very, very well. I think the worst hit I ever took was when I ran into Stevie Thomas. We were coming across and we collided at the offensive blue line, and we were both laying on the ice for about 10 minutes before we got up and got off the ice.
Now, Wendell, your appointment as captain was handled a little different than Rick's, with a different consequence for you during training camp, or actually Team Canada training camp.
Yeah, it was a 91 training camp for Team Canada. It was one of the bonus things. I got called in by Cliff Fletcher and Tom Watt to announce that I was able to be captain, and that was the honor. And about 2 days later, I got cut from Team Canada again. So that was the high point of my Team Canada tryout. But no, a huge honor. You're in training camp with all the best NHL players that are trying out, and anytime you get to wear a letter or to see on your jersey in a city like Toronto, it's a huge honor, and that's something that I think I'll always remember and always respect. Just playing in the city like Toronto, and to be honored that they thought you could wear the C.
Now, guys, some of the antics going around the team must have left you guys shaking your heads. I mean, is this really happening? Is this really the NHL? Give the listeners an idea of some of the bizarre things that were going on around the team at the time when you guys were there. I mean, Boris Salming told Squid and I on our podcast that he'd arrive at the rink every day, look outside the dressing room, and just think, what's going on in Circus Land today? Russ, maybe you lead it off. And this is all centered around Harold, of course.
Well, I'll tell a John Brophy story. He took over, and we had some smokers on our team. And we had smokers during the game. We had about 6 guys who had to have a dart in between periods. And so Brophy comes in first day of training camp, and he says, "It's been a goddamn country club around here." He goes, "There'll be no smoking during the game in between periods in the bathroom. If you want to fucking smoke, go over and smoke in the weight room." So the guys who are sitting out riding the bike, we're trying to ride the bike, and they got guys in between periods like Al Afraidy had 2 going at once. And I got to tell you, Harold Ballard was so great to me and my family. Every time we went to Vancouver, he'd take care of my family's hotel rooms and all this stuff. And I have good memories of Harold. Obviously, like the guy said, he was making the decisions which would have been nice to have somebody in place that was helping him and making some better decisions. But anyways, he was good to me. He was an interesting guy, and we saw a lot of them. Wendel and I'll tell this. I probably told the story before, but Clarky and I, after we had nowhere to go, we're both single. We shoot pucks, have a shower, hot tub, whatever, and we were bored, so we started filling up all the hair dryers with baby powder, and we're waiting for the guys to come out and blow dry their hair, and they get hammered with baby powder. Well, nobody's going to this one hair dryer, and all of a sudden Harold walks in, turns, he's in a beautiful suit, turns, looks in the mirror, and he grabs the hair dryer, and both Wendell and I are like, no, and he hit the power button, and completely, he looked like the abominable snowman. He was completely white, and he turned around, and all we could see was his red mouth, and he goes, "Now that's a good one."
Now, wasn't he also for you and Wendell your personal ATM machine, or Gord Stellick was your personal ATM machine when you guys were young and no credit cards or the debit cards or any of that stuff at the time?
Well, that was our 20 bucks per diem from Gord on the road. That's about all we got. But, no, probably the best thing, or it's not great. It was harder on Rick, and Gary was a little longer there than we were. Russ and I, and definitely Boria was there forever. He was ancient, but they would have known what it's like to be on a great hockey team. You know, in the 70s, he played on some great teams there with Darryl, and especially that 76 through 78 and all that. So they understood. So when we got there in the 80s and Rick had went through all the tough times, and so they could understand good and bad and how it was going, where Russ and I, and especially myself, we get there, we're just happy to be in the NHL at that time. We don't understand all the stuff that's going on and how bad it is. And remember, you're 18, 19, you're in the NHL. You're wiping out all of that stuff that's ahead. But Rick would have been dealing with it as a captain, and Boria would have been there forever. They would have dealt with it and understood what good was and what wasn't good. And so they felt more pressure and anxiety, I think, playing through those times than we did as rookies. And I think maybe that helped us. Harold treated me great. And I know we weren't ever going to win with Harold at your leadership, but he didn't treat me bad or as a person badly, so I can't say anything bad. It was his team. He owned it. He can do what he wants with it type thing. We don't have to agree with him, but it was his. Now,
Gary, didn't he have a ritual before your chartered flights would leave off the airport that he'd have to go through every time before you could wheels in the air?
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for this one. Yeah, well, I mean, you know, to elaborate on how he was, the guys liked Harold. Harold was he was that crusty old grandfather that you know, you had, and you know, he what I think people don't realize is the game had passed him by, and he was getting older, and you know, he ended up passing of dementia, and he had that for a little while before you know, most of the people recognized it. And so, you know, the decisions that that he was making, you know, it's pretty hard when you're in that condition. So that, you know, that's one of the things he would never give up his control, and that was the you know, the thing that held us back, I think, as an organization. And and that's just the way it is. Like Wendell and Russ said, he treated guys well. He treated Boria great. He used to send Boria to the Grand Cayman, you know, at some point during the year, because Boria played so much and was so loyal to him, and he was loyal too to the guys that he felt were loyal to him. So you know, there were some good points about him, and then there were, you know, the things that maybe put, you know, the organization back a number of years. And unfortunately, we were there at that time, and we had to deal with it. But getting back to your question, yeah, he had a bit of a ritual, or a bit of a prostate issue, whatever one you want to call it. We'd be getting on our charter, and he would always sit at the front, and he'd want to go on first, but he'd always have to have a little a little squirt on the front tire for luck, or I don't know whether he just couldn't make it up the stairs into the bathroom, but he'd piss on the front tire before every flight.
Well, but you got to remember, you guys are all established NHLers now in the league. And you know how revered the Toronto Maple Leafs are held by its fan base, the history of the iconic franchise, the hallowed halls of the Gardens. Yet you can be delayed to get in the ice for practice because the trainer's rubbing the feet of the owner, or he's getting a massage or something. Or, Rick, you want time to get your wrist taped and you had to wait.
Yeah, I mean, as the guys said, like Harold treated all the guys pretty decently. I mean, I don't think he was bad to anybody on the team. It was just, the things like you said, like Guy Kinnear, who was actually his boat mechanic in Midland. He wasn't even our certified trainer. He became our trainer, so he would rub Harold's legs every day before practice because of his circulation problems with the diabetes. But if you wanted anything done, you had to wait until he was done with Harold, or so if you wanted your wrist taped or something before practice, you were going to wait. And sometimes you had to go out for practice before you got it taped and go through practice without it. But you know what? It was what it was. Harold, like I said, Harold never really treated me or any of the other guys badly. It was just, one of those things that we had to put up with on a pretty regular daily basis.
Well, not just you. I remember Gordy Stellick told us the story one time that the team was in an awful slump. They'd lost a number in a row. They're down by 5 or 6, end up, I think, losing 8-0. You guys remember this. Brophy was the coach, actually, I believe, at the time. So I'd like to know what his reaction was after this. But the fans were booing. They're throwing stuff on the ice. They're throwing sweaters on the ice. And Gordy gets a call in the press box from Harold, and he said, "Get to the bunker here immediately." So he's walking down, and Gordy's thinking, what's he going to do? I got to fire the coach. Do I have to send somebody down? I got to bring somebody up? Who's he want me to trade for? He's preparing for all this. He opens the door to the bunker. Harold looks at him and says, "What the fuck kind of music is that he's playing on that organ? Tell him to change that goddamn music." So Gordy turns around and goes back upstairs. But after that game, I don't know if you guys remember that. What would Brophy say after a game like that?
Which 8-0 loss.
Yeah. Well, when they threw the sweaters on the ice and everything that night.
And we call them souvenirs. And in their disgust, the Leafs.
I'll tell you one thing, if I was Harold Snett or Al Secord, I'd get a
boy.
helmet on.
Well,
Like that. Believe me,
Perhaps.
all the players, especially at home, when you are a Leaf team and you lose at home, and that's how the fans react. The coach never really has to say anything because the players take that to heart. We're the ones playing in front of all the fans. But Brof had many nights where he would blow up motivating us, and it was I think we were playing in Quebec one night, and he was going around. We might have been losing about 3-0 in Quebec. I think there might have been in net. Kenny Reagan, you couldn't sit on the bench, so Kenny Reagan was sitting across the bench in the doorway on the way to the dressing room. And Quebec City and Montreal, the two places with the best hot dogs post game that we'd all have ordered up post game. And Brof was going around the room and tearing a strip off every player after the first period. He gets it to Kenny Reagan. And we got the blue jerseys on, and Kenny's got the mustard stripe right down the middle of the white leaf. Right in the after the first period. And Brof just turned and walked out of the dressing room. He had a yellow streak of mustard right down the front of the leaf after the first period.
Kenny wasn't that smart then, Wendell. He should have had them before the game like I did.
Well, or you could serve somebody one time. I want to get into the coaches, and maybe you can tell that story in a second. But throughout the 80s and early 90s, the team went through 9, 10, 11, depending on, you did take your number. A couple of them coached a couple games or a game here or there. Somebody filled in for George Armstrong. I'd like to get into some of those guys, but also in fairness to them, while they were watching you guys, I'm sure they had one eye in the bunker, wondering where the owner may replace them at TC Puck at any given moment. So I'm sure there was a lot of distractions going on for the coaches too. But maybe, Gary, you start off with the coaches.
Which one?
Well, just kind of. I'll tell you what. I saved the whole section for Brophy alone.
Gary, tell the story about what Paul Coffey says to you about how much fun we must have had when he hears your story.
Sorry, Wendell, I didn't hear that.
Paul Coffey, what he said about the Leafs.
You know, when we're all telling stories after, and Paul says, "I wish I hadn't won all those cups and could have been in Toronto." All the stories that we'd be telling what down in Toronto.
Oh yeah. Oh, he loves the Brophy stories. They're classic. They go over very well. They go over well with the guys that were winning cups, that's for sure. But
there's nothing after fuck off.
Yeah, you know, really, like the bottom line. I'm, you know, we didn't learn anything. Like guys, jump in and tell me if I'm wrong here, and then I challenge the rest of the guys that played in the '80s. You know, from the time at least I was there, did we learn anything? Did we have a system? Did Toronto have, you know, something that, you know, they carried forward from the successful 1978 team? Like, I wasn't learning anything, I swear. I mean, I ended up 10 years later playing for the Montreal Canadiens, and I learned more the 1 year in Montreal than I did in the previous 10 years in the National Hockey League with you know, not 8.5 of them being with the Leafs. So there was so much change, so much turnover that there wasn't time for coaches to implement any type of, well, I guess there was time, but you know, so we didn't have any kind of system. So we weren't learning anything. We were kind of on the job training, and it was like it was like potluck every night. And, you know, sometimes our talent got us through it, and you know, a lot of the time it didn't. So that's really how I honestly look at that time period. And I think a lot of guys were robbed of success because we didn't have any direction. We had a lot of interference, a lot of change, a lot of you know, no messaging. So you can only use your talent so far, but you have to have everybody on the same page, thinking the same way, and trying to get the same end result after getting through to everybody. You know.
Hey Gary, we didn't even have X's and O's.
It was too hard to spell.
No, they didn't know how to. Our coaches didn't know how to make them.
How about when Bro turned the lights off in the locker room? We had a shitty first period. I think he was the assistant coach at the time, and he came in and hit the lights and said, "If you're gonna sleep out there, you can sleep in here."
Yeah.
It was completely pitch black in there. Oh my God!
Yeah. Well, I think like Gary said, that was the biggest thing. I think you could probably say that about half the teams in the league, probably in the '80s. Maybe there was half that had direction from the people above them, and you know, had some systems and that sort of thing. I think probably half the teams in the league were in the same situation as us, as far as the coaches not really teaching them a whole lot or putting good systems into play. I think, you know, with the guys we had we had that a coach that could do that, I think we would have had a lot of success. I really do.
Well,
but we didn't. I mean, my time there, 5 coaches are not, like you said. I mean, it was just dump and chase, and you know, fortunately, I played a lot, and I had some good line mates and had success. But as a team, we didn't, because we didn't have direction.
Well, just think about this. You had 5 GMs over that period too. And the other part of that is you've got a different voice coming in the room almost annually, or maybe biannually. How the hell are you going to get behind a guy, support him, if you know he's not even going to be there in 3 or 4 months? So it had to be really tough for the players to focus. Like Dan Maloney, let's get into him for a little bit. There's some guys who thought he was maybe let go a little too soon when he was just starting to find his way as a coach and find his way with the players. And there's other guys that thought he wasn't. So, Russ, why don't you pick that one up?
I think Dan was coming into his own, and we had success that playoff year. We swept Chicago. We took St. Louis to the 7th game, and we had 4 really good lines. And Dan was starting to let us play. Dan was so intense when he first took over as coach. He was a screamer, and there's a video of him. I mean, he was so intense. And then during that playoff run, he really calmed down, and he just started rolling the lines. And Dan Deo was our checking centerman with Greg Terrian, and I don't know if Smitty was on that line or what, but they knew their role. And then we had 3 really good lines that could score, and we were coming as a group. And then boom, Dan goes to Winnipeg because Harold wouldn't pay him. And we trade Rick and Stumpy, and the house of cards start, falling around us. And it helped some people, but as a group, it really changed our makeup of our team after that summer.
Gary, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think what Russ was saying, anytime you have that much change, I mean, the turnover was all the time. I think you were always looking over your shoulder. Like, that was kind of the culture, there's a lot of intimidation factors back then. And like, you look at the types of coaches, Dan Maloney, a tough guy, John Brophy, tough guy. Other teams had, Tessier and Nanny, and, just a bunch of guys that had reputations of being tough. And so the culture was all about being tough. And is that how you win? Like, you got to be tough. Of course you got to be tough, but there's lots of ways to be tough. The measure of toughness sometimes is what you can take. And I think we took an awful lot from every different level. There were guys that were upset with ownership. There were guys that were upset with coaching. There were guys upset with management because it never came together. There was never a unified front from management, and that trickled down, and changes occur. And there was never the message that we all needed to hear. It was change. And so when you're living in that culture, you're wondering when you're going to be the next guy. And, I had enough of it. I played my 8.5 years there, and I had finally said, you know what? We ended up trading Luke Richardson, Vinny Danfus, and Scotty Thornton. And I was like, here we go again. I gotta go somewhere where it's not going to be like this anymore. And so that was my experience, and that's what I learned. I didn't learn an awful lot other than, kind of look out for yourself and look out for your teammates and look out for, the unknown. And it's no way to be a pro. And that was the downfall of that time period, that era of the Toronto Maple Leafs. There was no direction. There was none of that.
Squid, you and Maloney had some battles. One good one in particular you've told before, but maybe share that one with the listeners. When he's trying to make an example of you one night.
Yeah, it was. He was told by Jerry, I guess, to leave all the young guys alone, and he wasn't allowed to get on them or yell at them or anything. So anyway, we played I think a Saturday night at home and a Sunday in Washington. We lost both games. Billy, John Anderson, and myself never scored in those 2 games, but we didn't get scored on either. Anyway, long story short, Monday before practice, I got the paper, and I know that the writers don't make the headlines. So the headline said, Maloney blames Vaive or Zorrego's line for both losses. And I figured, oh, whatever, the writer didn't do that, somebody else did. And then I started reading the article, and he actually did blame us. So anyway, we're after practice, he blows the whistle, and everybody comes in. He says, okay, everybody off except for Anderson, Vaive, Zorrego, and Walt Podubny was coming back from an injury at the time. So anyway, he says, okay, he said, Vaive, you and Anderson start skating this way and don't stop until I tell you. And I said, oh, you gotta take it out on someone, so you're picking us, are you? And I said, so I started skating, and he started chasing me and yelling at me, and I'm like, I just said, fuck off, Dan, just leave me alone. And then I get about 1 or 2 laps in, and then Brophy comes. He's the assistant. And I had Brophy in Birmingham, so I knew Brophy well. And he comes up, Squid, come on, take it easy. I said, you fuck off too, you old bastard. And I just kept skating and skating, and then the next game at home, we got benched the whole game. And that's when Billy and John started playing halfway through the first. And well, I sat the whole game, but Dan moved with me everywhere I went on the bench. And some guy up behind us yells out, hey, Rick, he said, you're not very busy. Do you mind getting me a hot dog? And I wanted to turn around so bad and ask him what he wanted on it. But I figured if I did, Danny would punch me in the head, and I didn't really want to feel his fist go through the back of my head.
Now, Russ, you've had a couple good Brophy stories. One I loved that you told me from the past was Stevie Thomas's introduction to him after his first game, not scoring in his first period.
Oh yeah.
Maybe tell a couple of those.
They called up. So they call up Stumpy, and he sat right beside me, and Gary was beside Stumpy, Steve Thomas, and he didn't, for whatever reason, didn't have a good first period. He was nervous. He was generally a nervous guy when we first started playing, and he wanted to have success. And anyways, this one period he didn't, and Brophy came in and said he'd just been called up from St. Catharines, and he said, it might be 34 kilometers to St. Catharines to get to Toronto, but it'll be 3 years if we send you back or something. Gary, you probably know the story, what he said better than me, but it was like, there's 34 kilometers up here, and it'll be 3 years if we send you back or some fucking thing.
Gary
Dumpy went out and scored a couple goals, I think, in the third period.
Now, what about
does an impression of Brophy better than anybody I know.
Yeah.
Gary does a good. Well, we'll get one on. Well, actually, Russ, one more I want you to tell us when he followed you into the hot tub and you knew you were in hot water.
So we never knew when practice was over with Brophy. So Brophy.
Oh yeah.
Sorry, I was charging my phone. So Brophy, we all feel like, okay, we just had a good practice. It's an hour long. And then he'd get his second or third win, and he would start bag skating us and start a whole new practice. So we're in Maple Leaf Gardens, and we'd had a good practice, and I'm like, okay, I'm getting off the ice. So I go off the ice, I strip down, and I go in this new hot tub Harold just put in our locker room for us. And Boria was injured, so Boria saw me in the hot tub by himself. So I get in the hot tub with Boria, and we're shooting the shit. And I hear click, 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 ice skates on the bathroom tiles. And I peek back, and it's frickin' Brophy. And I'm like, oh my God. And Boria couldn't see him. And I start shaking my head, and Brophy comes in and goes, oh yeah, you're fucking off the ice, eh? You're off the ice, you're done. He goes, we're doing the power play right now, and you're in the fucking hot tub with this old guy. And starts pointing at Boria has nothing to do with it. And I get in so much shit. And so I'm like, what do I do? Like, do I get dressed? And I went, fuck it. You know, I stayed in there. And of course, that was probably the beginning of the end. But he, oh my God, so pissed off. Oh,
What?
you just
Gary,
with
you
it.
had one, Gary, from the power. Speaking of power plays, you had a power play incident with Brophy that I kind of.
Oh
Yeah, and it was all Wendell's fault too. Yeah, I'm on the left point at Maple Leaf Gardens. I got the puck in their end, and there's Wendell on the far half boards, and he makes a move to go towards the net, then puts the brakes on. So I'm thinking he wants the pass, and then he takes off towards the net. Well, that's when I fired him the pass, and then he was gone. So he was probably just trying to lose the guy. But the puck went into the corner. It went all quiet at the Gardens, and all I hear is from the bench, "Lehman, wake the fuck up!" And that's Bro yelling at me, and I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" Like he's never done that. Like I felt like I was one of his go-to guys, and played the crap out of me, and I wanted to win for him because, you know, he played me, man.
Yeah.
Anyhow, I turn around and yell, "Shut the fuck up!" at the top of my voice, and I couldn't believe I said that. Like, if I could have, you know, retracted it, but I was so pissed off that he embarrassed me like that. So anyhow, I get back to the bench, and you remember the stool, of course. I sit on the stool, and I'm pissed off, and of course he's probably embarrassed from one of his players yelling at him. And so he comes down and he says, "Hey," and I don't look. And that was when there was no glass behind. I could touch the people in the front row golds here. I could touch their knees. And I heard him, and I didn't look because I'm still pissed off. And he goes, "Hey." He says it again. So I turn and look, and he's about 3 feet away, and he's got tears in his eyes. Like, seriously, his eyes are welled up. And he goes, "Don't ever tell me to fuck off on TV again." So I'm like, did I just, like, you can't make this shit up, people, okay? So anyhow, after the game, of course, I get called in, and he's pissed. He's in his room, and I walk in because I got summoned. He stuck his head in, and he gives me the bony finger, and so I walk in, and he's standing there, and he's like pacing behind his desk there, which is about 3 feet wide. Like, it's one step. And he finally turns to me, and he says, "There's nothing after fuck off." I couldn't believe my ears. I'm like, I said, "Take me off your fucking power play," and then that was it. But he's like, no. He was so intense. But if you told him, you know, to fuck off, that was it. Your relationship was over. So he was just letting me know there's nothing after fuck off.
Well, actually, the best one, Squid, is the one where you introduced Gary and told him about the new coach over the summer. And then I guess, now Gary's laughing again because they're going to let you out to make you tell that story also. So let's hear that one. This will explain to everybody how intense this guy was as a coach. And I promise to leave you alone after this.
Let me start by saying Brophy was actually a pretty good guy. He wanted to win so badly.
Yeah.
And I think if he had came in to the NHL like 15 years earlier, he might have had more success because he wasn't he didn't have any game plan, no systems or anything. And at that time, that was coming into the league already. I mean, it was already in the league where coaches had figured out ways to play certain teams. And Brophy wasn't that type of coach. He was more of a motivator. So had he come in 15 years earlier, I think he would have had success. But anyway, the funny part was Gary when I said, "Did you hear who we hired?" And he goes, "No, who'd we hire?" I said, "John Brophy." He goes, "Who's this? Who's that?" "You don't know John Brophy?" Anyway, I'll let him finish. He tells the story much better than I do.
Well, I had never heard of John, and you know, I said, no, who's that? He says, well, I had him in was it Birmingham?
Birmingham.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and there was a story about John coaching Montreal's farm team in Halifax, where they had this. They were in the playoffs, and this kid that was, and I'll reiterate what Ricky said. Rolf was a great guy. Away from the game, he was an incredible. He was the first guy I'd want to have a beer with. Honest to God, he just wanted to win so bad, and that's that was how I was engaged with him, and anyhow, but when it came to the game, he was pretty intense. So they're in Halifax, they're in the playoffs, they're all beat up, and this is Montreal's farm team, and they had just lost the game, and their dressing room was right behind the bench, or sorry, right behind the where the Zamboni goes in and out. So it was right there. So, but that's where they had all the kids in the wheelchairs, people in the wheelchairs, made it accessible for them to watch the game. And one of the kids was a good friend of Brof's, and Brof would give him sticks and jerseys and all this stuff. So Squid's telling me this story about they lost the game, and the kid decides, because he's close to everybody on the team, he decides he's going to wheel himself into the room before the guys come off the ice to kind of cheer them up. So he's in the middle of the room, and all the guys are coming off the ice. They're all banged up and pissed off, and they're like, "Hey, buddy, you better get out of here, because Brof's not going to want to see you in here." So he can't get out because the guys are coming in. He's in a wheelchair. So I guess Ricky tells me he walks into the room. He sees the kid in the middle of the room. He grabs the wheelchair and fires him out the door and yells, "Get the fuck out of here! We got enough cripples in here!" Oh my goodness! So I'm like, this can't be true. He's not like that. There's no stories out there about him like that. Anyhow,
And sure enough,
I know it's not politically correct, but
well,
it's the first story I ever heard about him.
Well, the strong connection you all have, besides being teammates, is you're all good players, but all traded for 4 different reasons. So, Squid, you're the oldest. You were the first to move before the 87th season. How'd that all unfold, or were you even aware it was happening?
I mean, there was a little bit of talk going on, but I don't know. I mean, I wasn't prepared for it. I wasn't expecting it. I think after my first year that I got traded to Toronto, I never scored less than, I think, 33 goals in a season. So I wasn't expecting to get traded, but it was at the Telemedia, who owned the rights to the Leaf games at the time. They had a golf tournament every year, and it was up there where I found out Bill Waters was there, and he came to me after the golf tournament, said he got traded to Chicago. Well, I get home and I got to leave. I got to pack up. I had to take my wife's minivan and fill it with everything I could, because I had to be at training camp in 2 days. I had to be in Chicago, and so that was frustrating. It was really disappointing that I got traded, because I didn't want to leave Toronto, and I knew that we had some good young players, like I said, like Wendel and Russ and Gary, and I didn't know that they would all get traded later on, but I thought at the time we had a pretty good team that looked like it could go somewhere. But so that was pretty disappointing for me.
Russ, a year later, team off to a decent start. Wendell's in and out of the lineup with some injuries. You're in Brof's doghouse. He won't play you. It leads to an FU moment, or a couple of them anyway, to the point of no return. Walk us through that all unfolded for you.
Yeah, I came into camp, and Vinny Damprous had really started selling it there, and Brof started playing Vinny a lot, and I was playing a lot less, and then he sat me out. and Wendel wasn't playing. I don't think. I think Wendel was injured, and after 11 games, we're off to a great start. I think we're 7-4, and I'm not playing. And Brof wanted a tough guy, so they traded me. And the first time you're traded, you're always shocked. So I was in shock when I probably shouldn't have been. And then I went to Montreal, and it was just a great move for me. Got it restarted my career, and then they moved me from center to right wing, which I'd never played wing before, and went to the finals that year, so it was a good time, probably good timing for me, because who knows what would have happened if I had stayed. I mean, I might have ended up in the minors and not made it back to the NHL. I don't know, but the move was a good one. It was just surprising at the time, even though I shouldn't have been surprised.
How'd you get number 6?
So we're at the North York where we practiced when something was going on at Maple Leaf Gardens. I get the trainer hands me a piece of paper, call this number. So I called Gord Stullick, and then Gord gave me Serge Savard's number. I call Serge Savard, and we talk. He goes, okay, we want to have a press conference tonight. We want to know what number you want to wear. So when I go, what numbers are available? And he goes, 6, 41, 50, 52. I mean, it was a joke, because all the good numbers were either born or retired. And then I'm like thinking, should I be 49? Should I, because I was wearing number 9. I was trying to think of some number they had available with 9 in it. And he kept pushing 6 on me. And he goes, don't you think you should wear number 6? And I'm like, 6? That's like a defenseman's number. He goes, Pierre Mondoux wore 6. And they really wanted me to wear the number that kind of reflected the type of player it was. So they really wanted me to wear 6. And I go, well, 6 is an upside down 9, so I'll wear 6. What the heck? And he goes, good choice. But they had already kind of. So,
now, Wendel, sorry. Yeah. So, Wendel, you were hearing all kinds of rumors like they always talk about. And then one day, and then on draft day, you find out in the most peculiar place, you're all of a sudden on the move.
Yeah, no, it was probably the first year there wasn't a lot of rumors. We'd lost in the semifinals again, and I was filling up with gas at Front in Bathurst, across from the Molson Brewery, and turned the radio on to see who we drafted in the first round, and I heard I was traded to the Quebec Nordiques. That's how I found out. And
hey, Clarky, how many cases of beer did you pick up at the Molson Brewery that day?
Across the street to Molson's with Buddy Buds, and then Todd Gillen took me out.
And didn't get your first speeding ticket a couple weeks later?
End of the summer driving to Quebec for training camp. I figured out I wasn't a Toronto Maple Leaf anymore. When I was east of Kingston, I got my first traffic ticket in Ontario ever.
Now, Gary, your story, I don't think a lot of people know your trade and the impact you had on it, because it's really one of the more obviously bigger ones in Toronto history. Maybe walk us through that and how it all kind of unfolded and your impact or your play on it actually at the end.
Yeah, sure. I kind of alluded to what had happened earlier that season, not about a month earlier, I think, where we had traded Vinny Danfus, Luke Richardson, Scotty Thornton, Peter Ing, Freddie Charles, and $100,000 to the Oilers for Grant Fuhr, who was obviously on the downside of his career, and same with Glenn Anderson, and they had already traded Gretz, and I just thought that we had given up the farm again, like we had done many times before. Now, at the beginning of that season, though, when Cliff Fletcher showed up, he had tried to trade for me in 1988, And I knew he was a fan. And he had come to me and he asked me if I wanted to stay or go. And because there was talk of a deal with Edmonton at that time, I said, as of right now, I want to stay because I was afraid to get traded to a place that was rebuilding, like Edmonton was obviously doing. They were getting rid of that team that was so great. So the fact that they ended up trading, Toronto ended up trading Danfus and Richardson, both guys ended up playing 20 years in the league, and Scotty Thornton 18 years. I I was testing the waters to see how it was for the next little while, and it was no better. It was we weren't, in my mind, we weren't going in the right direction, and I thought this is crazy, and I had enough, and I called my agent, who was Rick Kern at the time, and I said, Rick, it's time. Let's move on here. And ironically, there was already a deal on the table, and apparently it was for Dan Merwa instead of myself, going to Calgary for the guys that ended up coming this way in the trade that I was involved in. So I asked to be traded. Maybe in hindsight, had I known the team might have been as good as it was, I obviously my first choice would have been to win in Toronto, but it didn't happen, and I was okay with it, except that I felt like I was going to another rebuild. So that's what happened.
Now, you all played for original six teams after you left the Leafs. Give the listeners some of the subtle similarities playing in some of those places. Rush, you've got a great story that being a Montreal Canadian is off the charts, walking around that city, and one of the most famous names in rock experienced that one night. Maybe tell us that story.
Well, I want to reiterate what Gary said about wanting to win in Toronto, because when you win in Toronto, it's such an incredible experience. Just the little success we had, off round was amazing. And then I get traded to Montreal, and it's like being a rock star there. When I played there, it was unbelievable. So there's one night our backup goalie is in old Montreal with his wife having dinner, and right beside him is Mick Jagger and somebody having dinner, and they're sitting there and they're talking. I can't believe, like, Mick Jagger. And so they're sitting there enjoying their dinner, and out comes the chef, flies up the middle of the restaurant, turns his back on Mick Jagger, and goes to Brian Hayward and says, Mr. Hayward, can I have your autograph? I'd be honored. So Hazy signs the paper, gives it to him, and the chef turns around and runs back to the kitchen. Mick Jagger goes, excuse me, who are you? I play for the Montreal Canadiens. And he goes, that's never happened to me in my life. And that's what it's like to be a Montreal Canadian. I mean, you are from the best goalie to the best player. You're an absolute rock star in that city. And it goes the other way too. When things don't go well, it's bad, because I'll tell you another quick story. Chris Jolius and I go with his wife Tracy after a game. We lost 4-2, and I can't remember who we lost to. We didn't lose too many games in Montreal, but we lost this one night. We went to a little Italian restaurant. It's popular with the players, called Da Vinci. And after dinner, Tracy's going to go home. Shelly and I are going to go to the bar after. So he says, wave down a cab. So I'm out on St. Catherine Street waving down a cab. Cab pulls up. I open the door, and he goes, you fucking guys lost tonight. Get another cab. Canadian, good and bad.
Now, Wendel, you were in Quebec. What was it like in Quebec City when you were there? You were there a short time, but what was that all like? Similar?
No, Quebec is very passionate, and that was a good young hockey team, maybe the most talented young team. They ended up winning the cup the next year in Colorado. but very passionate. That rivalry between Quebec and Montreal was unbelievable.
Awesome.
Those two cities hate each other. They're so competitive, especially when it came to hockey. So that was a fun rivalry to get to play in that shortened 40-game season. But it's another, typical Canadian hockey town that loved the game and understood why I ended up getting trading for Sundin. You think of it, center ice at the time because of the Eric Lindros trade. They had Sakic, Sundin, Forsberg, Deadmarsh, and Ricci with their 5 centermen. And you couldn't give them enough ice time. There are too many good players. So that trade that they did with Eric provided them with a lot of players, and they needed some old players because their whole team was 21.
Well, guys, we want to thank you guys for spending so much time with us. Just a couple of minutes. I want to get to the fun part that Squid and I usually like is talk about some of the pranksters. Now, I can tell you guys, I'll set this one right up the bat. We had one of the best of all time. We get one every time we come on the show. Now, Doug Gilmore. Now, to show you this guy, the 2 names that always come up are Ty Domi and Doug Gilmore. Don't cross these guys because it's not tit for tat, because when it's on for life. And to show you what Gilmore's like, he spares no expense with anybody. His neighbor at Christmas one time, they're having a bonfire, and Gary Roberts happened to be one of the neighbors, and he's at this party. So they're having a few beers with the neighbors. He taps Roberts on the shoulder and says, "Come with me." They go in the house, they go in the guy's pantry, and go in the cupboards and take all the cans out and take all the labels out the cans and put them back. Like, this is deep pranking of guys. This is like, he was on a video call with us, and I still checked my shoes to make sure they weren't tied to the floor or stapled to the floor or filled with shaving cream or something. So starting with that one, Russ, have you got any good ones that you can tell us to start off with?
Well, Ray-Jean Houle in Montreal was our Molson beer rep. And I was full, and I didn't have a car, so one of the veterans would give me their SUV, and I would go down and I would do the beer run because Molson's would give us all free beer. So I would go down and I would have a list of everything that got the whole team, everybody who had made an order from. I would give it to Ray-Jean. So I'm sitting in his office, and he has to go and tell the guys or whoever and get signatures. And so I'm sitting in his office, and we always played practical jokes on Ray-Jean. So I'm sitting in his office. I go into his desk, and I take all the papers, and I just start moving them all over. I took everything, and I put it in a different place. And he came back in his office and gave me the yellow sheet. I went down and got beer. That Saturday night, he came up to me and he goes, "Tabernakis Nicolas." He goes, "It's taking me all week to find my paperwork." "You fucking bastard. I give you free beer and you ruin my week."
Now,
that's one off the top of the head who wasn't a player, but we had a lot of fun playing tricks on guys. And
well, what about the Medano one when you guys got him? He was cheaped out on you guys one night. You look at him with a fire extinguisher in Dallas. When you're in Dallas, Russ. Did I lose you?
Oh, he's kind of fading in and out.
Yeah, he lost his sound.
Or
We'll go to the next one. Wendell, what about you? Any good ones for you during your time?
Yeah, no, there's lots of good ones.
oh, there you are. What was that? Sorry,
Well, I was going to get to the
everyone, I didn't get
I was going to get to the Medano story. The Mike Medano story. When you guys got hit. Yeah.
Yeah. So Shane Churla and I, Mike Medano, and Brent Gilchrist, we go to the casino in St. Louis. Mike wins a bunch of money. We all lose. We go out to a bar after, and he doesn't frickin' buy us a drink. So Chuck and I are super pissed off because we're going, fuck Medano. He just won all that money. He's being cheap. So they go to their room first, and we're walking down. We're at I think it's the Omni Hotel, the train station in St. Louis. So Chuck goes, we got to do something. So we grab the fire extinguisher, and I had never been around a fire extinguisher when it went off with the white powder. So we grab this fire extinguisher. I knock on the door. They open the door and they've got the chain on. They know something's up. He sticks the nozzle in and goes wah, wah, like 2 or 3 shots of the fire extinguisher. And we put it down and we run down the hallway to our room. And just before we get to the room, their door opens, like they slam it open and they tuck and roll out of their room. And all this white powder comes out of the room and they're gagging, coughing, and they're completely white. And what we didn't realize is the fire extinguisher, it sucks all the oxygen out of the air. And so those 2 guys were choking to death in the room and they couldn't see. They barely found the door, opened it. And Chuck and I are like, we thought they were kidding at first, and we almost killed Mike Vitano and Frank Pelgrims. Because if they hadn't found the door, they probably would have freaking died. And then there's a story after how they tried to charge us for the damage in the room, and we got out of that. Thank God Doug Armstrong stuck up for us. But Chuck and I almost killed Mike Vitano because he didn't buy us a beer.
Well, that sounds about fitting for a Canadian against an American. Wendell, you were saying, sorry, we interrupted there with little technical problems.
No, I can't compete with stories like that. That's unbelievable. I can't remember half the ones that happened back there. And tell me.
But yeah, how about this? Did Killer ever get you with one? He must have got you at one point.
No, not really. But Dougie was always involved in doing a lot of pranks in the dressing room and really getting everybody involved. But there's tons going all over the place, and that's a good story to give them.
Gary, how about you? You must have a couple.
Well, there was a bunch of pranksters. A lot of pranksters. One in particular, he's on your show right now, and another guy that actually got nailed by another guy. We were having a team meal in Chicago, I think it was, and we used to do these things called shoe checks. So there were tables of 8 that the guys would sit at. There's a buffet style meal, game day meal, in the away town, in the away hotel, and Ricky Squid has all the nice. He's got the nice attire. He's got the nice suits and the expensive shoes. And we there was one guy that. So what happens is a guy grabs either the sour cream or the ketchup that's on the buffet, and they take it back to their table and they wait for the right time, and then the rest of the guys are in on it. And so when the time happens, the guy goes under the table that he's at, and usually he hits a guy that has his back to that table. And in this instance, it was Squid, and he got under right beside him and got under the table, like maybe even under his chair, and he took a big scoop of sour cream and very gently put it on the toe of his shoe. And then you give the guy time to come back to his table. He sits down, and then somebody takes a fork and goes, shoe check. Shoe check. Shoe check. So everybody's like, oh, shit, was it me? Did I get it? So everybody looks at their shoes, and it was Squid. Squid got it. And he's pissed off. Because he's got the expensive attire going, right? He's looking pretty sharp until now. So he's like, fuck you guys, you assholes, blah, 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 blah. So anyhow, we go back to eat, and everybody has a good chuckle. Well, it happens again. And poor Squid stands up, and he goes, you fucking guys. He's like, I don't fucking dress like you cheap motherfuckers. I have nice fucking clothes, you cheap motherfuckers.
Hey, you know what? I had to vacuum the goddamn stuff out of the little holes in those shoes.
But,
Well, what about you?
but the best, Mike, the best one I heard,
Sorry.
he might or might not be on this podcast right now. We had a guy that owned a vintage Corvette.
Oh,
Oh, that could be a hint. I'm not sure, but anyhow, we're going on a road trip,
Donnie.
and somebody decides that they're gonna mess with this car, so they do what they got to do with it. Okay, we go on the road trip. This is parked at the airport hotel or the airport parking lot. We go on our road trip. We play our game or our games, and we come back. I think it was late, so it must have been a charter flight. And everybody goes to their cars, and this one guy that owns this Corvette opens the door, turns on his car, warms it up, puts it in reverse, and all 4 tires fall off. So I'm not so sure if he wants to fess up after what? Let me think. 30 years? Or not. But that might be the best one of all time. Unlugging every nut on that car, and that thing was sitting on its axis. I'm not sure if he's here or not.
Or
But anyhow,
Well,
that was the best I
guys
ever.
can you guys hear me?
I can hear you. We can hear you.
This might be a good time for Wendell to talk about our Christmas party in Toronto, and we egged the
And we what?
we egged the wrong car.
I can't remember.
Okay, I'll tell them.
Attaboy, Russ.
So we'd have these team parties. We took over this bar, and the same guy who had the old Corvette, the goalie, first name Don, last name Edwards. He got a brand new blue Cadillac. Well, we didn't know it, but Rick Vaive also got a brand new blue Cadillac at the same time. And Wendell and I went into the kitchen, and it's freezing cold, Christmas time in Toronto.
I think mine was gray, wasn't it?
We got 24 eggs, and we go out to egg Donnie's car. So we nailed it with 24 eggs. By the time we got out there, they're all frozen on the brand new car. So everybody's leaving the party. We go out, and Don Edwards walks by the egg car to his car, and it was Rick Vaive's car that got egged.
I don't even remember
You
that.
took that well. You took that well, I'm sure.
I don't even remember, to be quite honest with you.
Kind of like Harold when he hit when we got him with the baby powder. Clark and her sitting there going, no, we got the wrong.
You had a good time at that party.
Rick, you were so pissed off because I think it took, when you got it washed the next day, it took paint off the car.
Oh, it probably did.
Whoever fucking egged my car, I washed it today and I got no paint left.
Probably the best one that I've ever seen or heard was before I got to Toronto when Punch was the GM and he was trading Daryl's buddies and everything. Well, they went on a road trip and somebody, well, I know who it was, but somebody took the cable right off the battery, stole the cables, and so the car would not start, period. And they get back from the road trip and it's late in the early in the morning or whatever, and Punch is there. He can't get his car started. Well, Hutchie and I forget who was driving, but Hutchie was hanging out the window with a set of cables, waving them in the air as he drove by Punch's car. Says, "Need some help?" And then they just kept going.
That's a true story, Squid. It was Ian Turnbull that was driving.
Hutchie, right?
And Hutchie, Hutchie, it was riding shotgun, and the way I had heard it from Hutchie is it was just before the trading deadline, And
Yeah, then they went to a bar and they were
well,
throwing darts at his picture on a dartboard.
well, what had happened was Imlach had come over and said, "Hey, anybody got any jumper cables?" And Turnbull says no, because I guess he just didn't like him, right? So I guess what he did was he opened the trunk, he pulled out his cables, and he slammed the trunk on one end of them, and he drove by him while they're sparking behind. So there's poor Hutchie going by, and Turnbull's driving, but Imlach saw Hutchie, and he traded him the next day.
Yeah.
Well, boys, that's good. Anything else, boys, before we let you guys go? I think it's been long enough now. But Russ, you see, Russ is hanging up already. He's gone.
He's gone.
He's gone.
I didn't mean to do that. Sorry. I was trying to get rid of a phone call coming in. Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. All right, boys. Well, listen, we want to thank you guys so much for joining the Hockey Time Machine. It's been great. Some great stories. I don't know what to do next now. I guess Paul and Laura, you guys come on now. Laura, there you are. I can't hear you.
Can't hear you. You're muted.
Sorry.
Come on. Come on, Laura. Get with it.
Well, I think some people want to join and ask you guys some questions if you guys want to hang around. But I don't know if you got enough beer out there, Russ, or not.
I've had a few White Claws. I might have to make myself something now.
Wendel looks like he's hiding there because he doesn't want to say anything because he's just waiting for you guys to lay him out.
I'm what?
No.
At least 4-3 right now.
The what?
It's up to you. We're 4-3 for us.
Yeah.
Okay.
For the good
What do
guys.
you mean us? What do you mean us? What position do you play, Laura?
Whatever's needed.
That'll go.
That's it. Yeah. Anyways, that was good, boys. Yeah. See, it wasn't too bad. Sorry, Gary, I got you on a couple of those ones. I know you cringe at telling, but they are funny.
You know what? If the Leaf fans listening, they should know all these. They should know the history of the Leafs, the real stuff that went on, like Russ was talking about when coach comes into the room. You guys are playing like you're in the dark, turns the lights off and walks out, and you can hear him. You know, it's pitch black, so sit in the fucking dark.
No, but
All
I mean,
that
that's
stuff
the.
happened.
Now, that's the stuff that people don't know. And like other things, like the story I didn't tell on here until we run out of time was when you guys get traded out of Toronto, what people don't realize, like Tiger Williams told us a story one time when he went to Vancouver for Rick. He goes to practice. The boys take him out after for lunch. So they're sitting around. And he said, "All right, who do I see about furniture, stereo, car and all?" They're all looking at him like he's got 2 hits. Said, well, this guy gets a deal from that dealership, and this guy over here, I don't know, Best Buy over here doesn't get. No. Who comps us on restaurants? Nobody. What? I've never paid for a dip, but reality sunk in.
Yeah.
And I want to get the point that you made, Wendel, one time that maybe players should start their career almost in Toronto before they go somewhere else to get a feel of what it's really like.
If you go to one of the original 6 teams, you're going to get all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like when I went to Chicago, Denny Savard, all those guys, they looked after me. They knew every place where you could get a deal. So
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
maybe it's just because they were around so long, those 6 teams.
Yeah.
And it really depends on what it's like there first. Like, I look at my career and I'm thinking, man, I wish I was somewhere else first. And let them sort out all the dysfunction in Toronto all that time, where, by the time you get there, things are like, basically like they are now.
Mm-hmm. No, you're right. That's a good point. We keep losing Wendel.
Yeah.
Well, that was no mistake. Oh.
Well, it's last call. We're supposed to go home at last call.
Sliding out of the bar.
Hey, Wendel, your buddy's blaming you, saying that you did it on purpose. You know that, eh?
I got traded.
Hey, Paul, you got any questions for the guys?
Can they stick around a bit on the Zoom?
Well, you got to ask them. You don't ask me.
Maybe you can each take one question. We can do it right now if you wanted to. I'm not controlling the question, so I don't know.
Hold
Who's
on.
got the questions?
Let me find one. Hold on. There was coaching more. Oh, what's this? Hold on. Here's Fred Barrett.
I gotta get a beer. Hang on.
What? Let me
There's
find. Oh, here we are.
Here's a good point. Ah, there you go.
Yeah, who wants to take this one?
Squid, you're looking serious. Go ahead.
I think I probably would have liked to stay in the time that I did play if things had been different. Like if we had been better managed, better owned, better coached, and obviously made more money. I like the style of the game that we played back then more so than a little bit more than it is now. But it's not even that. It's just old Maple Leaf Gardens and that you watched on Hockey Night in Canada when you were a kid and everything, and playing in all those original 6 buildings in Detroit and Chicago, Montreal. It was unbelievable.
Well, I was going to ask Wendel a question on here. You, when you played for Burns, and we talked about that 85, 86, 87 team in the talent versus 92, 93, and maybe the coaching was a little worse in the 80s and so on. What impact do you think Pat Burns would have made maybe on the 85, 87 team, or would he have made a difference?
Yeah, we'd have made the playoffs and done even better. Burnsy wasn't always well liked. Russ knows Burnsy as good as any of us know Burnsy, but he coached the Montreal style that played the game as a group, and that's what our team needed in 85 to 87. We had lots of skill and talent and different levels. We just needed somebody to put it together and somebody that had confidence in putting it together. All winning comes from the top down.
Yep, agreed. That's what I thought you might say.
Okay, so best player you ever played against. Who wants to take this one?
Mario Lemieux.
For me, it was Larry Robinson.
For me, it was Alex McGillney. Guy that could do just about anything on the ice. This guy was so talented.
Russ, who was the best player you ever played against?
Oh, I played with him and
Against?
Yeah, against.
Gretz. Best player was
You
Gretz.
have to say that. You have to say that. You're buddies.
He just moved to St. Louis, for crying out loud. He left me.
Really?
What?
Yeah, he
had
sold
enough
his house
of you?
here at Sherwood, and they're living in St. Louis right now.
Oh my! Really?
Yeah. But I have Squid. Alexander Mogilny is probably the most underrated player of our time. The guy was so freaking talented. I've never seen anybody who could score like Alexander. He drove goalies in practice crazy. They couldn't stop him.
Yeah.
And Kirk McLean would probably reiterate that. But what a talent, man. The only thing Alexander Mogilny couldn't do was skate backwards.
Yeah. But
he couldn't skate backwards.
But he didn't have to.
No.
Because he always had the puck.
Yeah, what a great player.
You imagine the World Juniors when they were in Alaska, him, Bure, and Fedorov were a line.
Yeah.
Can you imagine those 3 guys playing together?
Oh my
God.
Crazy. They did a tour when they played the Saskatchewan Junior League. They did a tour. The 3 of them played on the Russian team at 16 years old, and they beat all the junior teams in Saskatchewan with those 3 players at 16 years old on the same. So they're all playing against 20-year-olds. They couldn't touch that team with those 3 on it.
Yeah, they were good.
What was your best memories of Wilcox?
Chads.
Russ Corknell sending me to Chad's for a pop and a chocolate bar.
Yeah, by the way, guys, I got a cousin that teaches there now.
Really?
He's been there for about 5-6 years or more, maybe 10 years. He's a teacher and he's an assistant coach with one of the age groups. I'm not sure which one. He's from Charlottetown.
Wow.
Okay, besides Wendell, who was the toughest player pound for pound?
Todd Gill.
Oh God.
I
You know
agree.
what?
What was Todd Gill? He'd fight Joey Kosher and he'd fight all the guys. And he'd be what? 175 pounds, 5'11", no chest.
You remember the night he fought? Remember the night he fought Probert?
Yeah.
Probert knocked him down, and he went down to his knees, got back up, and kicked the shit out of Probert. Like it was.
Todd Gill was a tough son of a bitch and a great guy. What a teammate.
Yeah,
absolutely.
What a teammate. My first game back, I think in Toronto, when I played for the Habs, Giller beat the shit out of Tom Chorsky. And he skates by me and he goes, "I haven't lost it, Rusty." Oh, he was funny. I loved Giller. If you guys see him, tell him I said hi.
Collecting maple syrup up by Kingston.
What's the next question, Laura?
Okay, here we go.
There we go.
2 questions to do with fashion. Who was the best dressed player in the 80s? Was it Wendell in that famous denim? Also, what is your favorite style of Leafs jersey?
Best dressed?
Best dressed would have been Russ.
Yeah. I don't know.
Petrocelli, 2 for 1, $150.
Well, didn't you shop at Le Chateau, Russ?
Pardon me?
Barry, didn't you say that, Le Chateau? Is that where he took you guys?
No, we had a guy, Steve Richmond.
I was joking.
And God, they owned Big Star Jeans together. Anyways, they got us dressed up in some pretty funky clothes. Sid Better and Steve Richmond.
It's the Matthews and Marner are dressing in a lot of the same stuff, Russ, that you would have been dressing in back then. It's all come back.
Yeah, good. Well, that's what we used to say about your suits. Keep wearing them; they'll come back in style.
I still have all my old suits.
Actually, maybe shouldn't. They're winning.
Shocker.
Why, they're winning? What's the score?
Also, what's your favorite Leafs jersey?
I like the current one.
Yeah, but
Clean look. I like the maple.
I don't know.
leaf.
You got to go 855.
I don't like everything on the shoulders or down the sleeves. Just plain for me.
Oh God, of course.
All right, I think we're at the last one. Oh, here we go.
I got a whole pile sent. I didn't know I was supposed to open these.
Do the guys go back to Wilcox for reunions or any school charity events?
No, the charity events usually done in Toronto. Gary and I have been at a couple that have been held in Toronto. Haven't been back. And COVID time, we haven't gone anywhere in the last year.
Yeah, the last time I was there, my son was in 9th grade. So probably 11 years ago I was there when my son went. But we try to support the school as best we can. They're going to do an online auction, and I think they've reached out to all 3 of us. We're going to sign something for an online auction. Try to help them out as best we can.
Awesome. And that seems to be the end of our questions. So,
cheers.
I hope I didn't get them all sent to me.
Oh, they were sent
all
to you.
good, guys.
Well, we're
great seeing you.
So that was awesome. Thank you.
Okay, guys.
Take care, fellas.
Thank you, boys.
All you youngsters.
Thanks for everything, guys. Thanks, Wendell,
Thanks,
Rusty,
Thanks, Mike.
Gary.
Thanks, Laura.
Thank you. Thanks,
guys.
you.
Thanks a lot, guys.
It's a program. Can you please press like?
Hey, Russ, are you still playing at Sherwood?
Yeah.
Are you living there?
Yeah. I'm on the 13th hole.